Welcome to the HR Stories podcast, listener question edition, where there is a lesson in every story. Each week, the team at HR Stories podcast shares questions from our podcast audience and provides tangible, practical advice that everyone can use to get HR right. Our hosts today are management and HR consultants Chuck Simikian and John Thalheimer. What is on your mind today? Welcome to the HR Stories podcast, where there is a lesson in every story. This is the question and answering episode, Mr. Chuck Simikian, Director of HR in Paradise.
Yeah. For a second there, I thought this was Masterpiece Theater. Welcome. Masterpiece Theater.
Sometimes it is like Masterpiece Theater here in the HR Studios podcast studios. Right, really, Sam? Sam's our producer. She's always trying to make it a little higher brow.
Than the rest of well, I can definitely hear the dun 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 dun. I'm like, oh, that was a very eloquent beginning, John, and I am excited this week to answer 3 questions from 3 well-deserving listeners who won the question answer lottery. So why don't you shoot, John? Let's see what we got.
Yeah, and again, I want everyone to feel comfortable sending their questions in to us. You can do it to email us at team@hrstories.com, and we'll get them and we'll put them on the air. We'll answer them for you. We'll probably answer them in, we'll probably have a back and forth with you in the email, but we'll answer them on air as well. Probably need more details sometimes. This one, the first 2 come from our Facebook group. And they're both anonymous because we want to keep them anonymous. And so that's what they want. We will do that for them. All right. So here's the first question, Mr. Chuck Simikian. Up to this point, I've had job descriptions created when we've hired employees if there wasn't one previously, meaning that in her role or his role, when there was a new person that they were going to hire and there wasn't a job description, they would just create one. They would create one on the fly, make sure it's there. So far, This has worked really well. But I've recently been assigned the project of getting job descriptions for all positions. Does anybody have a good process, step by step, for getting this accomplished? I know you've done this a lot because I know you do a lot of consulting work. You go to the organization and you notice that there's not job descriptions. How do you handle that? What's your process to handle that?
Well, here's the deal. If there's no job descriptions at all, we got other problems that are probably going to be bigger. In other words, like a company that hasn't done their job descriptions probably doesn't have a lot of other things in place. So I don't go into the job descriptions right away because there's always other things. However, in order to do any job postings, I got to have some sort of job description. They're 2 different things, right? So I'll at least see if we have any job postings of all the jobs that we have. So I'll start matching things up at least. That's a good process to start with. What do I have? What scraps of survival gear can I pull together from the wreckage, shall we say? What about you, John?
Well, I think that's a good place to start. I don't think that's the process. I think that's a good place to start because you need to see what's available, right? And so you go through your files, you look at your job postings, you look at your job descriptions, and then in those places where it's not meeting your expectations, so maybe there is a job description, but it's missing work context, tools and technology, it's missing those important parts that that are important. You're going to kind of create a list and then you're going to have to kind of triage them. Like, where is it most important to do? And then you're going to have to sit down with the manager and go, all right, what's the purpose of this job? What are the tasks and responsibilities? What are the skills and knowledge needed? What are the tools they use? And really go through that. Now, let's talk about a couple shortcuts to this. For me, I always use ONET online because they have tons of information about any job out there, right? And so again, You may not have a job title that they have. You're going to find a lot of information. They're going to give you some really good task, and maybe that job doesn't do the task, and remove it, right? And so you kind of go there. The other thing that I'm hearing a lot of people are using, Mr. Chuck, is AI. And so I know historically, Chuck, that you may have used AI a little bit to do your job descriptions.
Well, here's what I've done. I've taken the notes that managers share with me. I've taken the scraps that I have found, and I will put them into an AI, and I will say, okay, based on this, let's start with a job description. So I think if you just go to AI and say, create me a job description for a food and beverage manager, you're going to get but if you take your stuff, put it in there and say, now take this and create a food, that's a whole different thing. So, but it does polish things up. So yes.
Yeah. And again, I think that's a good way. Using ONET, doing that, pulling all that together is a good way to kind of set that up. And the last thing, so now we've created the job description, definitely show it to the employee, have them go through it. I always say, and I don't know if you agree with this, Chuck, I always say the person in the role knows the role the best. And they can say, yep, I do that, or I don't do that, or God, I never used that tool.
Exactly.
They can give you that. Now, you may want to elevate that job description because you're going to think about hiring somebody that needs more knowledge, or they're going to change the role a little bit, but they're going to give you a good, yep, this is what I do, or you guys are crazy. I don't do any of these things. And so just making sure that it matches the job that you have, not this job on the we dream, right? So just being aware of that.
Yeah, no, I like that process. That's great. It sounds like a checklist.
Yeah, I think we have that in there. We do in our ultimate book of HR checklists. There is a job description checklist in there. So gotcha. Definitely something worthwhile to check in there. All right, question number 2. All right, Mr. Chuck. If someone says they have a disability that runs in their family that makes them slower to process things or work more slowly, and the fact that they are older, over 40, and not the most tech savvy, where is the line of a reasonable and unreasonable to accommodate him? All right, so let me give you some more background information on this, Chuck, just so you can kind of see that. They are, right? This person is completing the essential functions of the job. They're just doing it at a slower pace than everyone else. This is in the remote healthcare field. We have a manager who wants to get rid of this person because they aren't working quickly enough. And I'm just kind of hesitant to do that, and do wonder if part of the issue is trying to push workload on people that isn't reasonable, and they are expecting people to function at a unusually high rate, which only a young person would be able to perform well, as opposed to hiring more staff. Ooh, lots of little tidbits in there, Chuck. So what do you think? Piece that apart for me.
Piece it apart. It's about what's going on here. Okay, so the first thing, employee says, I have a disability. So they say, I have a disability that runs in my family that makes me slower to process. So I have a disability that has me where I can't process things fast. Okay. So you're going to go through the interactive process, just like anyone else would. There's a lot of stuff here. I have a manager who wants to get rid of the person they weren't clean up. So I'm going to go to the manager and I'm going to say, here's the deal. We have to go through a process to protect the company, to protect you, and to make sure that we give this employee a fair shake. Now, how, Mr. Manager, is it affecting productivity? How is it affecting customer service? How is it affecting other things going on right now? Sometimes managers are just irritated, because they're not working fast enough. They should be processing 20 claims a day. They're processing 15, okay. So how does that affect things? Yeah, I think that you got to go through the whole interactive process, find out if there truly is a disability, what accommodate, and that's what I didn't hear, John, is you got to ask the person, what accommodations do you need? And also, what are the parameters? There's a lot of things missing in this. What are the parameters for success? And then we have to look at what the accommodations could be to get that person up. And it could be, if there's truly a disability here, hiring additional staff.
Yeah, no, that was great. That was fantastic. Again, right? It goes directly to that interactive process. That's the simple solution. What gets me is that first sentence where they say we have an employee that has they say they have a disability that runs in their family, which sounds to me that they don't know if they have that, right? They don't know if they have that disability or not. It runs in my family. And so when we do that interactive process, one of those questions is going to be like, can you support that with documentation? I want documentation that says you have this impairment that impacting you. And then let's come up with a reasonable accommodation. And so in Chuck's example, maybe 15 is the reasonable accommodation. And so kind of going through that in there.
Okay, you know what? When I read that, I read that differently. They said they have a disability that runs in their family, but you could also read it as they have a disability that runs in the family. So the disability runs in the family, they may not necessarily have it. I see. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, right? And so, but I think the HR person here's onto it, right? He wary of just doing what the manager wants and thinking about, okay, what is the process? What do I need to do? And it really falls under the Americans with Disability Act, doing that interactive process. And the one thing that I would say though, Chuck, and you can tell me if I'm wrong on this, is just because somebody is over 40 does not give them excuse to not meet production.
Exactly.
Operation.
Yeah.
Right? So just be aware of that. I wouldn't use that as a thing. I would go through it, and just if it's an interactive thing, that's fine, right? If they're not being able to do their job, maybe it's an ADA complaint. All right, so good. All right, last one, Chuck. This is Katie W. And she says this: leadership team just threw her a curveball. The company is celebrating its 75th year in business. We were planning to bring remote and on-site teams together for an all-company diamond anniversary party and picnic. Now they want to scale back. Other than a party and swag, which we've already done, what is some remote activities or keepsakes that make sense to celebrate 75 years in business? We're looking for unique and creative ideas that can be done remotely. All right, let me get the facts straight here, Chuck. The company is 75 years old, and they want to reward their employees for meeting this wonderful milestone. So originally, they were going to bring everyone in, pay for their airfare, pay for their rooms, put all that up, have a large picnic, which was probably going to cost a lot of money, right? So I don't know. We don't know how many employees there are, but they were probably going to cost a lot of money to bring everybody in to do that celebration. Now, part of me thinks it's worth it. It's worth to have people connected and build that collaboration up and have that team building exercise. Having people in there to do that can be really important, right? To address that and to do that. Now, okay, so the executives made that decision. Our job in HR is not to be like, that's stupid, why can't you do that, blah, blah, blah. Our job is to figure out how can we make this special for our employees? Like, how can we make this recognizable for our employees, right? And so definitely can do swag, right? T-shirts, mugs, that kind of stuff with the 75-year logo on it. Boom, fantastic. But what can we do to bring everyone together in a Zoom setting and that kind of stuff? And so I think we have to go outside the box on this one, right? Yes. And so could you do like a concert right? Get somebody that's pretty famous or semi-famous and have them do a concert and then have everyone zoom into the concert, right? And
Okay.
so
I
it's a
like
kind of a
that.
Zoom
Yeah.
concert, right? Or doing some type of, I would do like 75 mini activities throughout the year. And so maybe it's, there's some swag in there, but maybe it's we're going to do a virtual company trivia one week. And then the other week, we're going to get together and have a conversation about 75 things that the company does well. I don't know, just kind of thinking about and creating these mini things. So it's not just one event, but it's numerous events over a time period to remind people why this company's been around for 75 years.
Okay. I like that. Yeah. Yeah. It really, I don't know why it stumps me so much right now, because we've been in now, we're what, 4 years into COVID, past COVID. We've done so many of these online things, online games, online celebrations. I just don't know what's left to do but I love that idea of the concert. Something really, really wild, just for maybe the online people, and maybe the live people too, right? They could attend the concert.
Well, no, totally. I think you would do it as a remote event, right? And then you wouldn't invite anybody on site, right? Because that would give them a different experience. You would say everyone's going to come in and we're going to do this remotely. The band's going to be set up, in their location, in their studio, and they're going to do a little studio concert for us. We all get to zoom in and watch it. I don't know. Again, right, I haven't thought about the logistics of it. But I know during COVID, there was a lot of singers and bands that were playing, like, Friday night, they would open up their Zoom and just be hanging out and talking to you and playing the guitar and stuff. But just something to connect them as a group, like, oh, we had this great experience. The goal here is to remind them that the company is 75 years old, which is fantastic. The second thing is to create a feeling of I belong to this company and they're doing something valuable for me.
I like that.
It could be a bonus, right? It could be the $7,500 bonus.
75
right?
shares of stock. But I like how you framed it up. You gave two parameters there. What would make me feel valued, and what would make me realize, hey, this is a big deal. I'm working for a company that's got this established tradition. So I like how you framed that up.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a good question. And again, we don't know all the parameters. How much money do you have? What can you do? But, finding that, doing those two things, making sure they feel valued, and making sure they feel connected to the company, and talking about that history is really important. They've been around for 75 years. They're doing something right.
Oh, and bring people that have been there a long time to talk about their memories and conversations. And, if there's some history and culture there, depending on what that culture is, that might, at Disney, the 15th anniversary of Disney, 20th, Walt Disney World, you bring some people that were there on day one. What was it like? What did we do? Now Disney,
I like that.
Years. Yeah. So that's kind of cool, but that's the culture over there. I don't know, if manufacturing company, what would they want to hear about? Who was around? What were some of the, talk about some of the historical things. Yeah, I think we're onto something there.
Yeah, I love the way you took it, because I think, so maybe it is a manufacturing company. Where was I? I was just listening. Somebody was talking about their company, and it was like 100 years old. And it was started in the 1800s, and I forgot the type of company, but what they started doing, although it related to what they were doing now, they just adapted over the years. And think about, why did you change from this to this, and why was that important? And right. And so having those conversations could really ground them in the culture and why that was important, and talk about the challenges, and doing interviews of people that have been there. I like that.
And the future.
That's the
what
solution.
are the next 75 years going to look like?
Yeah,
the next
and have somebody.
Oh,
let me tell you a funny story, because you just brought up some memory. So we had, and he was fantastic. We had a vice president, and he came in one day to our town hall meeting dressed up as if he was 50 years older.
Oh,
and they
nice.
interviewed him like, so what was it like to be there in that heyday of QVC, and what's going on? And it was so, they put him in makeup, and like they had him dressed up. He walked in, and it was hilarious. I mean, it was hilarious, but it was also very impactful to think about, we're making history now. People are going to be looking back on this at this moment in time. So it was a really cool thing to do.
I love that idea. That's cool. That sounds neat. So, folks, you've been listening to the HR Stories podcast, Q&A edition. By the way, episode 80 of the HR Stories podcast. Unbelievable. Over 25,000 downloads. And that's just downloads. That's not just listeners. We are having fun, and we, love what we do. And we thank you for being with us on this journey.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening to the HR Stories podcast. The material presented in this podcast is for informational purposes only. Chuck and John always recommend using an employment lawyer or HR consultant to handle any legal concerns or HR issues. We do our best to double check sources and make sure the information we are providing is accurate. We may eliminate or embellish without changing the basic narrative to make the story easier to understand. In certain circumstances, we may change identifying information to protect the innocent. The HR Stories broadcast is brought to you by the team at HR Stories. The team at HR Stories is designed to help anyone with HR responsibilities be better at managing the employee experience. To engage with us, go to the hrstoriesteam.com and learn more about how the team at HR Stories can support your business or nonprofit. Thank you for listening to the HR Stories podcast, where there is a lesson in every story.